Story number 1. The humid summer air hung heavy, thick with the scent of overripe honeysuckle and something else. Something metallic and faintly medicinal that clung to the crumbling brickwork of Oak Haven Sanatorium. For Alara, a restless soul teetering on the precipice of adulthood at 17, the abandoned asylum wasn't just a local legend, it was a siren call. Her friend Kalen, a lanky boy with a penchant for the macabre and an overactive imagination, had described it with a breathless intensity that had burrowed into Alara's mind. He'd called it a monument to forgotten madness, a phrase that resonated with the quiet rebellion simmering within her. The last tendrils of daylight were bleeding across the horizon as the motley crew of 6 teenagers finally coalesced outside the sanatorium's rusted gates. Alara hadn't even liked half of them. There was the boisterous twins, Finn and Ren, always egging each other on. The perpetually nervous Liam, who seemed to regret agreeing to this venture the moment it was suggested, and Chloe, a sharp-tongued girl who mostly tagged along to observe and offer cynical commentary. Kalen, of course, was the de facto leader, his eyes gleaming with an almost manic excitement. Alara felt a prickle of disappointment as they finally stood before the main building. It wasn't the gothic monstrosity of her imagination, all jagged edges and shattered windows screaming of tormented souls. Instead, it was a solid, albeit decaying structure with boarded-up windows and an unnerving stillness. The only truly unsettling thing was its isolation, nestled deep within a knot of overgrown woods, far from the comforting glow of streetlights. The others grumbled their agreement, their initial bravado already beginning to fray. But the journey had been long, fueled by teenage bravado and the promise of something illicit, so they pressed on. Kalen, with a theatrical flourish, pried open a warped back door, the groan of protesting wood echoing in the twilight. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust, decay, and something vaguely antiseptic. Strange objects littered the floor. Tarnished surgical instruments, stacks of dusty journals bound in cracked leather, and glass slides scattered like fallen leaves. It felt less like a haunted asylum and more like a forgotten archive of medical oddities. A wave of unease washed over Alara. This wasn't the thrill she'd anticipated, but something altogether more unsettling. Her gaze fell upon a towering mahogany bookshelf that dominated one wall, crammed with volumes whose titles were obscured by layers of grime. A small avalanche of books lay scattered on the floor before it, evidence of recent, morbid curiosity. It didn't take long to identify the culprit. Kalen, his face pale despite his earlier enthusiasm, pointed a trembling finger at an open book. Alara leaned closer, and a gasp escaped her lips. The pages were filled with meticulously detailed anatomical drawings, but not of healthy organs or standard procedures. These were illustrations of dissections, of flayed skin revealing muscle and bone, of faces frozen in silent screams. Some of the subjects appeared to be alive during the process, their eyes wide with unimaginable terror. Even Kalen, who had supposedly seen this before, looked queasy. His usual swagger vanished. "Isn't this a doctor's study?" Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Logic, that fragile shield against the unknown, offered a temporary reprieve from the creeping dread. While the others morbidly flipped through the gruesome illustrations, Alara found herself drawn to explore the rest of the ground floor. The rooms were eerily preserved. A parlor with faded velvet armchairs, a dining room with a long, dust-laden table set for a phantom meal, a kitchen with rusted utensils hanging from the walls. It spoke of a sudden abandonment, as if the inhabitants had simply vanished mid-life. Despite the decay, there was an undeniable air of intellect and refinement. The furniture, though draped in dust sheets, hinted at a former elegance. The layout was meticulously planned, maximizing space and light. This wasn't the lair of a madman. It felt like the home of someone brilliant, perhaps eccentric, but undeniably educated. "Probably some kind of mad scientist lived here," Finn quipped, trying to inject some much-needed levity. Alara bristled. There was a cold precision to the drawings, a detached artistry that didn't align with the chaotic image of a mad scientist. This felt deliberate, calculated. The fading light and the unsettling discoveries prompted a discussion about leaving. But as they retraced their steps through the ground floor, a disturbing realization dawned upon them. Despite having thoroughly explored every room, there was no staircase leading to an upper level, yet they all distinctly remembered seeing a second story from outside. "Maybe there's an outside staircase," Ren suggested, her voice tinged with a nervous tremor. They searched the perimeter of the building, but found nothing. Then, Near a crumbling section of the back wall, Liam pointed to a scattering of moss-covered stones, arranged in a suggestive broken line. Looks like there was a staircase here, once. A new wave of disquiet washed over Alara. Why would someone remove the stairs? What secrets lay hidden on the inaccessible second floor? The initial disappointment of the mundane exterior had morphed into a gnawing, unsettling curiosity. The idea that something was hidden upstairs, deliberately cut off from the world, ignited their imaginations. Forget going home, they had to know. The most viable option seemed to be a series of thick, rusted pipes running up the side of the building. Kalen, always eager to prove his mettle, volunteered to climb first. He ascended with surprising agility, his silhouette a stark contrast against the darkening sky. But then he stopped, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. You can't see anything through the upstairs windows. They're all covered with something dark. As the others cautiously followed, Alara felt a knot of apprehension tighten in her stomach. Newspaper and black marker obscured the glass, creating an impenetrable barrier. It wasn't just blocking the light. It felt like it was deliberately concealing something. Liam and Chloe, their nerves finally getting the better of them, decided to head back. Alara watched them go, a flicker of envy in her chest. They were the smart ones. The remaining four, Alara, Kalen, and the twins, huddled on the precarious rooftop, the wind whispering through the gaps in the decaying tiles. A silent vote passed between them, a shared reckless curiosity outweighing their growing unease. Alara, despite a rising tide of regret, found herself leading the way to the nearest window. She'd talked a big game, and backing out now felt like a betrayal of her own adventurous spirit. Summoning a courage she didn't feel, Alara wrestled with the warped window frame. With a screech of protesting wood, it finally swung inward. She gasped. Directly in front of her, plastered to the inside of the glass, was a life-size poster. It depicted a woman in a faded swimsuit, her painted smile unnervingly wide. Alara's heart leaped into her throat, and a scream caught in her chest. Then, Kalen's nervous laughter broke the tension. It's just a poster! You scared yourself silly! The others joined in, their relief palpable. Alara felt a wave of sheepishness wash over her, quickly followed by a prickle of annoyance. But as she steadied herself to climb through the window, something caught her eye. There was a smear of dark red on the poster, right where the woman's lips were painted. Lipstick? It seemed oddly specific, strangely intimate. Ignoring the unsettling detail, Alara clambered into the room, the others following close behind. They found themselves in a narrow, airless corridor, the air thick with a cloying sweetness that made Alara's stomach churn. Up until this point, despite the disturbing books, there had been a semblance of order, a hint of the previous occupant's intellect. But here, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Along the damp, peeling walls were photographs. At first glance, they seemed innocuous. Young women in vintage swimsuits and flapper dresses. But as Alara looked closer, a cold dread seeped into her bones. The faces of the women had been crudely cut out and replaced with the grotesque visages from the anatomical drawings downstairs. The effect was deeply disturbing, a bizarre and unsettling defacement. Any lingering sense of intellectual curiosity vanished, replaced by a primal urge to flee. Whether this was the work of the original resident or some disturbed squatter, the message was clear. Something deeply wrong had occurred here. Alara exchanged horrified glances with the others. The unspoken consensus was clear. Get out. As they turned to retreat towards the window, Liam's voice, thin and reedy, stopped them. There's someone there. He pointed a trembling finger down the hallway. At the far end, where the corridor opened into a larger room, a dim light flickered, and within that light, a figure stood silhouetted in a doorway. As their eyes adjusted, they realized it was a person, or at least something resembling one. It was tall and gaunt, its form indistinct in the gloom. Frozen in terror, they fumbled for their phone flashlights, the beams cutting through the oppressive darkness. As the light landed on the figure, a collective gasp escaped their lips. It wasn't a person. It was a mannequin, but not just one. The room beyond was filled with them, dozens upon dozens of female mannequins, arranged in a bizarre, silent congregation. They were dressed in various states of disarray, some in tattered lingerie, others in moth-eaten dresses, their blank, unseeing eyes fixed in their direction. What the hell? Finn whispered, his bravado completely evaporated. The air was thick with an unspoken, unsettling perversion. The undergarments the mannequins wore weren't functional. They were designed for display, for objectification. It was a glimpse into a disturbed and deeply lonely mind. Some kind of creepy doll collection? Ren stammered, her voice trembling. But it was more than a collection. It was an obsession. a shrine to something twisted. As they cautiously stepped further into the room, their flashlights danced across the unsettling tableau. Amongst the mannequins, they noticed other objects. A broken wind-up doll with vacant eyes, stacks of outdated fashion magazines with the same defaced faces crudely pasted over the models, and a small, dusty music box that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. Alara's blood ran cold as her flashlight beam landed on one of the magazines. It wasn't just old. The date on the cover was from the previous month. A wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't just a relic of the past. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. A faint sound, a soft scraping noise from the far corner of the room, shattered the silence. They all froze, their flashlights snapping towards the sound. Amongst the silent ranks of mannequins, something moved. It was subtle, a shift in the shadows, but undeniable. Then Alara saw it. Between two of the mannequins, a face emerged from the darkness. A wide, unsettling grin stretched across it, the teeth gleaming unnaturally in the dim light. An expression of pure, malevolent glee. "You like them?" a voice rasped from the shadows. It was a man's voice, but distorted, somehow wet and unnatural. Alara could just make out the outline of a figure stepping forward, and her breath hitched. He was wearing a dress, a tattered, stained dress that hung loosely on his gaunt frame. A strangled scream tore from Ren's throat. Panic erupted. They scrambled backward, a chaotic tangle of limbs and terrified cries, desperate to escape the suffocating presence of the room. Alara, caught in the crush, was the last to reach the window. As she flung herself onto the rooftop, she heard the voice again, closer this time, right behind her. "You like what I do?" The word sent a jolt of pure terror through her. Every hair on her body stood on end. Without looking back, Alara leaped from the roof, the rough tiles scraping her skin. She landed with a jarring thud on the overgrown lawn and didn't hesitate, bolting into the woods, the screams of her friends echoing behind her. Kalen, whose house was closest, burst through his front door, babbling incoherently to his bewildered parents. The next day, the police, initially skeptical, investigated Oak Haven Sanatorium. They found nothing. The building was empty. The disturbing contents vanished as if they had never existed. A second search yielded the same result. The man in the dress, the mannequins, the defaced magazines, all gone. Oak Haven was eventually demolished, and the land was cleared for a bland housing development. Years later, Alara visited the site, a cold knot of unease tightening in her chest. There was nothing to see. No trace of the horrors they had witnessed. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if they had all imagined it, a shared nightmare born from teenage boredom and morbid curiosity. But then she would remember the cold, raspy voice, the unsettling grin in the darkness, and the chilling question, "You like what I do?" And she knew, with a certainty that burrowed deep into her soul, that it had been real. The Ghost in the Algorithm, story number 2. Anya found solace in the digital hum of the Coastal Echoes Forum, a virtual gathering place for residents of her sleepy seaside town. Afternoons spent navigating the labyrinthine demands of her demanding boss at the local bakery, and the monotonous rhythm of kneading dough found their counterpoint in the lively discussions about local history, upcoming festivals, and the best places to grab a decent fish and chips. The forum was a lifeline, a place where she could shed the flour-dusted persona of the baker and simply be Anya, a lover of old movies and forgotten lore. Slowly, tentatively, friendships blossomed in the pixelated landscape. Shared jokes, late-night chats about anxieties and dreams, and the comforting anonymity of screen names fostered a sense of belonging. There was even talk of an in-person meetup, a prospect that both thrilled and terrified Anya, a creature of comfortable solitude. Then came a new profile, Coralia. Her request to join the forum appeared one rainy Tuesday afternoon. Anya, ever the welcoming presence, clicked accept. A few moments later, a message appeared on the main thread. "Hello everyone, new here? Hope to get to know you all." Anya felt a familiar pang of awkwardness for the newcomer. Navigating a new online community could be daunting. She decided to send Coralia a private message. "Welcome to Coastal Echoes. Feel free to jump into any of the discussions. We're a friendly bunch." Almost instantly, a chat window popped up. "Oh, thank you so much for reaching out. I was so nervous. Everyone here seems to know each other so well." Anya smiled at the screen. Coralia's profile picture was a little blurry, but she seemed to have a kind face, with warm eyes and a cascade of wavy auburn hair. "Don't worry," Anya typed back. "We were all new once. What brings you to Coastal Echoes?" They chatted late into the night, about everything and nothing. Coralia was a graphic designer, she said, working remotely. She loved the ocean, old black and white films, and had recently moved to town to be closer to her elderly grandmother. Anya found herself drawn to her easygoing nature and shared interests. It felt nice. A quiet warmth bloomed in the usually cool landscape of her online interactions. Days turned into weeks, and Anya found herself gravitating towards Coralia in the digital space. Their private messages became a daily ritual, a comforting rhythm in her otherwise predictable routine. She still interacted with other forum members, but their exchanges felt superficial compared to the deepening connection she felt with Coralia. One evening, while scrolling through the main forum, a subtle unease prickled at the back of Anya's neck. She realized that while she and Coralia exchanged messages constantly, Coralia rarely interacted with anyone else on the public forum. Her initial hello had been met with silence. No one liked her posts, and no one replied to her comments. It struck Anya as odd. The Coastal Echoes community was generally welcoming. Maybe she's just shy, Anya told herself, dismissing the thought. Coralia was so cheerful and engaging in their private chats. It was hard to imagine her being deliberately ostracized. Perhaps she was simply overwhelmed by the established dynamics of the group. As the weeks passed, Anya's routine solidified. Come home, brew tea, log onto the forum, and find Coralia's cheerful greeting waiting for her. "Welcome back, Anya! How was the bakery today?" It felt strangely intimate, like coming home to a waiting partner. One afternoon, a wave of guilt washed over Anya. She hadn't properly engaged with the other forum members in ages. She decided to send a message to Liam, one of the original members who had initially welcomed her. "Hey Liam, hope you're doing well. I've been chatting a lot with Coralia lately, the new member. She seems a bit isolated on the main forum. Do you think you and the others could maybe say hi?" She mentioned wanting to connect with more people. She waited. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. No reply. She tried messaging Sarah and Mark, 2 other active members. Silence. A knot of frustration tightened in her chest. Why were they ignoring her? She scrolled back through the public forum, searching for their recent activity. But as she scrolled further and further, a chilling realization dawned. Liam, Sarah, and Mark hadn't posted anything in weeks. In fact, many of the familiar names had vanished. It was as if the core group she had initially connected with had silently drifted away. Days later, a message finally popped up from Sarah.
"Anya, hey. I know you've become friendly with this Coralia person, and I'm really sorry to say this, but maybe keep your distance. Don't give her your address or phone number, and definitely don't meet her in person." Anya stared at the message, her brow furrowed in confusion and a growing sense of unease.
"What? Why? Is everything okay?" she typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. Another message arrived almost immediately. "Just trust me on this. There's something not right. Stick to online. Please like the video, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share."